This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by So this is an interview coming up here with Jason Gerhard, who was one of the supporters of Ed and Elaine Brown, arrested in the standoff. This is an infamous standoff in 2007, but a relatively peaceful one. The audio is a little uneven here. It gets better about halfway through the interview. So if you're put off too much by audio interruptions or latency, then you do have the option of skipping to the halfway mark. But it shouldn't be too bad, and it gets better. Okay, I've started audio recording. Is that all right?
That is all right.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, I'm ready. Okay. So Ridley here. I'm joined electronically by Jason Gerhard, who many of you may have forgotten. But tell me a little bit about yourself, Jason. Jason Gerhard of New Hampshire now, I guess.
Oh yeah, of Belmont. Back in 2007, I was involved in the standoff with Ed and Elaine Brown, and ended up going to jail because of it for a little bit.
That's a pretty modest way to put it. They put you away for what, 12 years?
12 and a half.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure.
Sentenced to 20 years, but because of a new Supreme Court case, was released back in January.
Okay. And you have, I guess there were 6 people arrested, 6 people arrested total and sentenced to jail in relation to that standoff, is that correct?
That is correct.
And of those 6, I believe you are the only one who has sort of reappeared in New Hampshire as a liberty activist. The rest are either still in jail or we never really hear from them.
Well, one testified against everybody, and he did about 2 years. And then another one went to trial. Sereno went to trial, and he got only convicted on 2 of the counts. So he was out after about 8 years. He disappeared. You're correct. And yeah, that's correct. Ed is still in jail, but everyone else is out now.
Well, actually, there's one other. It's not really. I wasn't really being very fair to Reno. Reno Gonzalez did remain. He continued to be a liberty activist, but he was. I don't think he was in New Hampshire except just briefly during the standoff.
Yeah, I don't actually know what happened with him. I think as far as I can tell, he fell off the map. But he went back to Texas last I heard.
He was fairly active for a while after that, and his girlfriend, did a lot of stuff toward the beginning. So he sort of felt like he was more active than he was sometimes because his girlfriend was a very effective magnifier.
True.
Yeah.
Very true. Well, kind of like Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like mini. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I did not do a very good job of keeping in touch with you while you were in jail, and we've actually never met in person, but I think we might have swapped some mail. I think I might have sent you 1 or 2 pieces of mail, and I never really found out, other than seeing a picture or 2 of you in jail, I never really found out what happened, after you went to jail. How did it work out for you?
It worked out pretty good. I'm out now. No, I mean, it was an interesting experience, to put it short. I was able to just put a lot of time into studying topics that I never thought I would study, and just meeting so many different types of people from all over the country. The federal prison system is interesting because you have people from all over. Usually in the state systems, it's everybody within, it's that little area. It's just not the same. But with the feds, you have people from Hawaii, California, hodgepodge of just everybody. And it was really interesting to see different people's point of views. And it was an interesting experience, best I could put it, without talking for hours about
it. Did you feel that there was anything that worked? I should actually probably provide a little bit more background before we go any further. The Ed and Elaine Brown standoff of 2007 was a tax standoff between the feds and a Plainfield couple, an elderly Plainfield couple, who they stopped going to court, after the feds took them to court they refused to pay the federal income tax. They were tax protesters. They didn't believe the law required them to pay federal income tax. And this created a little bit of a movement around them. It wasn't as big as some movements we've seen more recently, but it was big enough to be called a movement. It wasn't just a group. It wasn't just a cult. It was bigger than that. And these were basically liberty-leaning conspiracists, I guess would be the best term for them, at least especially for Ed. The standoff did generate national publicity. It was on Fox News, CNN. There was all kinds of media coverage. It lasted about 6 months. They just kept refusing to leave their house. They said they'd shoot the feds if they came to their house. The feds eventually infiltrated as a group of supporters, and then surprise attacked them from 5 feet away, basically, and no one was seriously hurt. But the many excessive prison sentences, some excessive prison sentences were handed down again, and I believe yours was one of them. And I guess also I hate to go long-winded here, but I should also, you probably know this better than I do, but I just want to remind you that you're probably being watched, and anything that you say can and probably will be used against you by the feds. So I urge caution in talking to me.
All right. Well taken. Well, I would like to correct you on a couple points. One was the standoff lasted for 10 months. And secondly, I believe any amount of prison time for a victimless crime is excessive. I mean, it could be 1 day you do for a victimless crime, and that's an excessive prison sentence. So it's hard to justify putting people in prison when there's no one hurt. There's no loss to anyone involved. You understand? But other than that, I guess that's a pretty good synopsis of the whole situation. They weren't allowed to present their defense motions. So after 3 days, Ed left the trial, went home and said, I'm done. And then his wife went back to finish the trial. It was a 5-day trial. And eventually she came back to New Hampshire. She was put on bail. She made bail bond, whatever it was, after trial. And then she came back to New Hampshire shortly after. So,
yeah, she technically escaped in mid or I guess early 2007 from her light confinement, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So This is what made it all interesting, right? That no one cared if there was a tax case in Concord until Ed holed up in his house and Elaine escaped, right? So then it became interesting to people, and you arrived when?
I arrived early January, I believe it was. I mean, I know it was in early January, but I was working on a school newspaper. I was going to college at the time. I went back to school after working in New York City for a little bit in construction, and I went there to interview him. And I mean, I already knew what was going on ahead of time. I slowly kind of woken up to what was going on with the Federal Reserve and everything else. 9/11. I'm from Long Island, so I met with Luke Brodowski, We Are Change. I went to some of his meetings in downtown Manhattan, and it was a lot of learning very fast. And then his situation came up, and it just seemed too coincidental. So I went up there to interview him. That was before his wife came back, the first interview I did with him. And then from there on out, I was up there every now and then.
Okay. And did you, the newspapers accused you of driving one of Ed's vehicles and being in a hit-and-run accident. Were they lying, or did that really happen?
That's not true. No, a young girl pulled out in front when I was driving into West Lebanon, and I hit her rear quarter panel. She's pulling onto the the interstate. And she admitted at the scene, she said, "Oh, it's my fault. I pulled out," because she pulled out right in front of a truck that was blocking my view in the left lane. I don't know if that makes sense, but then, so I'm in the right lane and I hit her. So I went to go make sure she was okay and went back to the car. The cops are there. It was not a hit and run at all. And the worst what bothered me about the whole situation is that she admitted at the scene that it was her fault. But then when her mother got involved, I guess they figured because it was involved with the Browns, they might as well ride it as hard as they could, and they accused me of doing a whole bunch of crazy stuff. So it is what it is.
Interesting, and for the whole 12-year period since then, I never heard any other story except that official story of a hit and run accident, at least as I recall it. So it's good to finally be able to have your side.
Well, that whole situation actually started that incident is probably what started my whole investigation, because there was a lot of people. I don't know how many times you were up at the Browns. I don't know if you want to say.
I was there.
There was a lot of.
Oh, I was there twice, but only for about a day each time. And then Ed got suspicious of me. Ed didn't really like me at first all that much, even though we were already friends. he was on edge.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to be calm in that kind of a situation, especially after the whole raid that failed in early June. But anyway, the marshals came after the car accident, and they took the car at gunpoint. So they said this is property of the federal government or whatever it was, but they didn't have a warrant or anything. So it got tense, but they eventually left with the car, and then I had a knife that was in the car, and I wanted it back, and they just pretty much ignored me. So I went to the police station the next day and filed a stolen vehicle report. And that, I believe, is what started a whole can of worms opening up.
Yeah. Yeah, they were picking their targets relatively carefully, I think. Although, as I talked to you, I think they could have probably found a better target than you, because you're pretty eloquent, and they could have, if more people had actually heard you and heard your concerns and seen videos of what you were going through, I think you would have been much more attention would have been paid to you, and people would have listened, because you don't sound like a crackpot.
No, I try not to be. I mean, it's just, it's funny. I think if that situation had happened right now, or even a year ago, or any time within the last 5 years, I think the whole thing would have ended very differently. I mean, the mood in the country seems to be much more critical of just, I don't know, it just seems to be getting much crazier every day, and at least the people that I'm around seem to be losing faith in the system as it is and just questioning everything. But back then, you got to remember, that was not that far after 9/11, and there was still that whole, you know what I mean? It wasn't really at the point now where we have just, I mean, at least people I know have zero trust in what's going on. I mean, it just seems like they keep lying to you over and over, especially with this whole pandemic, but I don't want to run on too long.
Well, there is a general sense, so there was until at least 2014. I think it may have started to change around 2014, but there was a general sense, not a sense, but actual statistics that indicated the level of violence in the world was significantly decreasing, and there is that long-term trend, in America, not American, but human history, right? I mean, it's 33 times less dangerous than it was, in the Middle Ages, and there was a short-term trend of increasing safety in the early 21st century. But apparently, we go through these 10-year periods now and then in human history, 10 or 20-year periods where the level of violence temporarily increases. And it seems like we hit one of those points around 2014, and the violence level is probably still increasing. But yeah, I think your intuition is probably correct that although the government's getting bigger, the actual amount of liberty people really live has been generally increasing until this year.
What do you mean by that? Increasing until this year?
Well, I think the level of freedom was going up, actually, in the United States and in the world, even though the on paper it was getting worse. In reality, it was getting better because it was you could easily share your concerns about the government with the public.
That's a good point. And I think also what's interesting about the whole pandemic is how it kind of split the liberty movement. Is the people that really do believe there's a problem, or the virus is what the government's telling us it is, going to kill every man, woman, and child. And then you have the other people that were just saying, no, we can't do this. I don't know, did you get a chance to go into the protests in Concord, the reopen New Hampshire people?
I have seen it, but I wasn't there.
Oh, okay. No, I was just curious.
Yeah, I did. I tend to kind of believe in doing my own thing when there's, like, I believe the biggest difference is the difference between 0 and 1. So I like to do protests by myself where there was going to be no protest otherwise. So I did a reopen protest at that location by myself.
Oh, okay. Actually, it's funny. I was telling you previously in a message, but I saw that video that you did, which is the reason it strikes me is because it was right before we got locked up. It was August of 2007, and you were walking down into Murphy Tavern in Manchester, and the cops stopped you because you were open carrying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't really even realize all that was going on back then. I was too preoccupied with what was going on there, and you guys are really pushing the envelope. And it's funny because you weren't even doing anything that crazy. It was perfectly legal, but...
Yeah, that was, well, I mean, everybody does something a little bit different, but that is sort of my MO, that you do something that's lawful and get in trouble for that, and then you're on it's a good hill to die on.
Sure. Very true.
That's really not an idea that I originated. That's Brad Jardis's concept. Brad Jardis is a cop in New Hampshire who became a liberty activist and was ejected from the police force. But you know what, Jason,
oh, wow.
You may want to try taking off your headphones, because I'm getting a little bit of there's something about the sound that isn't right, and maybe if you use direct sound, it might work better.
Okay, let me try.
How do you set? Can you?
All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, and it sounds for the moment it sounds better.
Okay, we'll use this then.
Okay. You've been able to look at the whole thing from a different angle, even though there were some liberty activists at the Browns. I think, actually, if you think about it, the Browns situation divided liberty activists too, just like the pandemic situation has.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just wasn't I'm from New York, obviously, so I wasn't really familiar with the whole group on a very intimate basis. Whereas since I've been out, I was living in Manchester, so I got to meet a lot of people who I never knew before, and to see it firsthand. You know what I mean? I was out in late January, and then the whole pandemic thing kind of came down, and you could see the lines forming, which I wasn't able to see up in New Hampshire, because the only people that really came there were the ones that were supportive. I'm sorry, Plainfield, that's what I meant.
Yeah, if you think about it, the line divided me too. In both conflicts, I was divided in the Brown situation against myself. And I'm divided against myself in the pandemic situation, because these are both borderline situations in a way. Ed was a little bit nutty, and he was a little bit. He wasn't really aggressively violent. But he was kind of a dangerous guy in some, at least, defensive way. And this, it gets a lot of publicity, but it also triggers a lot of opposition, and a lot of liberty folks don't want to be associated with that. They just want to do the Gandhi thing or the politics thing.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. But, I mean, I was a little bit closer to him, and I just didn't see that same side of him. It was, as far as I could say, it was much more theatrical. You know what I mean? It was designed to draw attention, and that obviously can backfire in multiple ways. But you have to understand where some people are coming from. I mean, like Randy Weaver was there for a period, and when you understand when you see what happened to him and his family, and then it's easy to kind of be Monday morning quarterback and you kind of say, oh, well, you should have done this and that. But when you're in the midst of it, because it was very laid back in the beginning, but then they had the raid that failed in early June when my co-defendant Dan Riley was shot at, and everything kind of got, because I was there before and after that situation, everything got much more serious, and it just changed after that. So, I mean, hey, everything happened that happened, and we're here now, and the question is, how do you proceed? We're all working towards greater liberty in New Hampshire and the country and the world, and I'm just trying to figure out that answer right now.
Yeah, well, it's been a real morale boost for me, actually, to see you, come back after all this time. Some people move to New Hampshire and then wander off for no particular reason. They practically destroyed you, and then you came back, seemed like stronger than before. Because now, unlike 2007, where, we're kind of, like, I didn't even own a video camera in early 2007. When they came and got your car, and you were confronted by federal marshals, that should have been a viral video, but it was a little too early, right? We weren't all carrying cameras around at that point. And
yeah, very true.
If these same things happened today, we would have all better lines of communication. Some of our lines of communication have gotten damaged, by Facebook, in the sense that we don't have the same kind of web forum traffic that we used to. YouTube has shadow banned me and many other people who aren't even really all that political. It's just sort of drawing traffic away from people like me who I used to get. I have videos that are in the millions of hits, and I used to average about 4,000 hits per video. And YouTube has, just taken immediate changes one day that cut me down to about 400 hits per video. So the number of people that find out what we're doing has been attrited, per day. But many people already knew what we were doing, because there was that brief period, this sort of sweet spot around 2013, where we were getting massive publicity. We weren't suffering very much, and people were moving here in large numbers. So, I think we have the society has been built, sort of, but the question is whether we have the ability to continue drawing large amounts of publicity.
I see. I mean, to be honest with you, I went in 2007. I'm just coming out now with all the technology that exists. I mean, just before this call, I didn't even have Skype. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not really sure. I still think, though, that it's not so much a matter of getting people from the outside moving in that should be the focus, but the people that are already here that are kind of on the fence. Because there's a lot of people that are just natives, I guess you would call them, of New Hampshire that don't know about the Free State Project.
Yeah, and in some ways, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, I met, for instance, my one friend, he had no idea, but he's very active, and now that he got into the whole group, it helps somebody, I don't know, have a second blossoming. I mean, it just gives them more encouragement to keep going, because now you have a whole group around you that's on the same kind of plan. Anyway, what were you saying?
Yeah, in some ways this is an advantage, because we were always scared back in 2002 and 2003. What's going to happen when we pick a state? We're going to be interlopers, right? We're going to be coming in from outside. How do we do this without being without having the interloper carpetbagger stigma? And what ended up happening is the media actually they generally tended to avoid covering us, and as a result of that, people were not inundated in their local newspapers with stories about Free Staters from outside, right? That just didn't really happen that much, and when it did, no one really cared, because that was one of the reasons New Hampshire got picked for the migration, was because it's a very welcoming place. It's just not xenophobic, and it has that perfect mix of being both mono-ethnic and non-xenophobic, if that makes any sense. So you don't get a lot of tension internally in New Hampshire as a result of people being from outside or whatnot, but you also don't get a lot of racism, and you don't get a lot of cruelty, if that makes sense. It's just this. It's the place that's in the sweet spot.
No, definitely. I think you're right. I mean, I'm up in the Lakes region, and it seems like the whole economy, I mean, not the whole economy, but it's very much based off of tourism. I mean, you could drive around, you see Massachusetts plates all day long. So I don't think you can be too xenophobic and be in that area. I mean,
well, yeah,
it just doesn't work.
Yeah, in fact, actually, that is the primary xenophobia that you will see in New Hampshire is anti-Massachusetts xenophobia. It's civic, it's not ethnic. But it would, I would prefer that even that did not exist. And I think Massachusetts immigrants are one of our greatest assets in New Hampshire, because the statistics indicate that those people tend to vote pro-freedom. Although there have not been there's only been 2 really scientific tests of this, but they both indicate that the Massachusetts immigrants are pro-freedom.
Yes, I sure hope so. And also another interesting thing about New Hampshire, because I was doing a whole bunch of research before I got out, I actually wrote a little essay, or I don't know what you want to call it, a little rant. But anyway, half of the state house in 2018 was elected with less than 1,500 votes, which is just amazing. Because, you have, obviously, there's 400 state representatives in this house in New Hampshire. So the fact is, it doesn't take all that much to get elected, as in money, per se. So it's a really good choice for a state. I really do think it was a good move.
Yeah, I think that the history has borne it out, and having people like you stay here and or move here or whatever, be forced to be here by the feds, has worked to our advantage. Where did they hold you for most of your prison time?
I was in South Jersey, a place called FCI Fairton.
Okay.
For 2008 to 2016, so it was 8 years, almost 8 full years, and then they sent me to a low security prison in Pennsylvania, Allenwood.
How did you end up back in New Hampshire as you were being released?
I claimed homeless. I wanted to come back here as part of my whole little game plan.
Nice. Yeah.
So I want to get into.
That's good.
My whole plan is to get into local politics.
Pardon?
My whole plan is to get into local politics. That was the whole plan.
Okay. All right. So claiming homeless allows you to pick your location of drop-off, or how does that work?
No. When you say you're homeless, they have to return you to where they arrested you from.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
So but technically, I was arrested in Missouri when I went into the Army right before I was locked up. So technically, I was in Missouri, but the case is out in New Hampshire, so that's what they consider your home.
Okay, so they successfully managed to reduce the number of soldiers that they had available by arresting you.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the things I kind of was thankful for in this whole situation, because joining the Army was something I had agreed to do before the whole Elaine thing came up. As actually before I went back to college in the fall of 2006. And one thing led to another, and I started questioning everything that was going on. Before then, I was kind of just drinking the Kool-Aid and going along with everything. And then, it all happened. And it was so funny because my original ship-out date was early June. And if that had gone through, I definitely wouldn't have been locked up. And who knows, I'd be poking landmines in Iraq or something. But because they pushed back the ship-out date for the job that I was going for to late August, everything kind of followed the path that it did. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would suspect you probably did more good for the world in jail than you would have in the Army.
I like to think so.
Yeah, I believe that is probably the case, and that is something to be disproven. That's the case until it is disproven, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and it's sad because I met I was only there for, 15 days or something, but there was some interesting people in there, and I remember one day the drill sergeant had everybody going around a little circle, and they were talking about why they joined, and there was just so many guys that said they needed the money, and I don't know, it's just kind of sad. but it's the world we're in.
Yeah, and that was before the depression before last.
Yeah.
Oh wait, that was
Yeah.
well, the depression before this one, I guess. Is what,
Remember, just real quick, 3/4 of the army is from down south. They thought it was so funny that I was from Long Island. I mean, it's just, you know what I mean? Everybody's from down south. It's just so down there economically, things are kind of always on the edge. But anyway.
well, I suspect that the South might rise again, and maybe rising again now as a result of their lack of their laid back shutdowns. We can hope.
Well, I know that there's a lot of people angry about the cultural attacks that are being attacked on the statues and all that other stuff in the Civil War. And what was it, Mississippi, or was it, I forget which state was the last state with the Confederate battle flag being taken off their state flag. So I don't know, all that stuff just seems like such a pointless venture. But
well, it's the whole Milosevic model of taking a civic crisis or a constitutional crisis, then an economic crisis, and trying to turn it into an ethnic crisis because you think you've got the largest numbers. But that doesn't work.
Yeah.
During your time locked up, how well or badly were you treated by the authorities?
Overall, I would say it was very good. I can't really complain about much. The only thing I would complain about is the fact that they would never let my twin brother come visit me because he was my twin. So that made no sense because other people with twins, identical twins, and I'm an identical twin. But anyway, they were allowed to have their twin come visit them. I mean, the idea is it's so insane that they don't believe this is the idea, I'm assuming, that their guards aren't competent enough to know if two people switch, and we don't even look alike anymore. I mean, and I have a tattoo. I mean, it's just the whole thing is such a joke. But I filed against it, filed a grievance on it, and it went all the way up to wherever. But in the process, one of the wardens pulled me aside one day, and because I filed multiple times, that's why I'm saying one of the wardens, and he said, "Listen, this is above my head. This is coming from the DA. Well, not the DA. What do you call them? I can't even remember the names now.
The marshals?
The federal prosecutor. No, the assistant U.S. attorney.
Okay.
From New Hampshire. So for whatever reason, they didn't want my twin coming to visit me. And then the warden issued a paper, the reason for the denial of, his visitation. And on it said, per the assistant U.S. attorney, you are not being allowed to have your twin visit you, or whatever the hell it said. But you know what I'm trying to get at. So he actually put him out there. And the interesting thing is, when I put the visiting request form in, he was approved. And then within like 24, 48 hours, whatever it was, it came back denied. So what the? And then I did it years later when I went to new prison. Same thing happened. He was approved, and that one was like 3 or 4 days. And then all of a sudden it was denied. So... besides that, though, I mean, really, federal prison is federal prison, and there's a lot of things you can improve in there. But I don't want to get too into that right now.
Well, decline to answer if you wish, but I know Elaine was thrown into I believe she was thrown into a communications management area where she was restricted in her ability to communicate with the outside world. Did that ever happen to you?
If you mean... Well, you have two different things going on. You have the SHU, the Special Housing Unit, which is the hole where you go if it's the jail inside a jail. I was in there a few times. One time for a completely bogus charge of stealing government documents that a friend of mine had received through a Freedom of Information Act request. And they were clearly marked as such, but they said, no, those were stolen. So anyway, that was a 2-week little stint. But the communication management units, the CMUs, those are where they put the political prisoners and or the Muslims and all that. And there's only 2 facilities, I believe, in the country that have them, out in Terre Haute, and there's another one, I want to say maybe in Colorado, but I'm not sure. But anyway, the point being is that I know Danny Riley, he was in one for a long time. And I didn't know Elaine was in one, so And I heard Ed was in one, but honestly, I haven't checked out in on that. I know Danny was for sure.
It's been so long that I'm not positive it was Elaine, but that's my recollection is that it was her. I just remember being shocked that they would put this person in there, and I wouldn't have been shocked, if they'd put Ed in one, but the fact that I was shocked and the fact that I remember it being Elaine, I think it was Elaine, but I could be wrong. But yeah, Danny, I don't know, he wasn't getting much publicity, so I don't understand why they would stop him from being in communication.
Yeah, he had a rough time in prison. At least from my point of view. I mean, he was stabbed, beat up multiple times, the whole thing. I mean, you get in fights and stuff, that's whatever. But he seemed like he kind of had a rough road.
I heard about the stabbing, and I was able to report on that. But is he out now?
Yes, he got out one day after I did. I got out January 30th, so apparently they couldn't process his paperwork fast enough or something, so he had to be released the following day.
Okay, well, I'm glad he's out. He didn't do enough to deserve what happened to him. I guess he did, though. He admitted to me in writing that he had provided information about other rebels or activists or whatever brown rebels, I guess is what I like to call you.
The brown rebels, yeah. He kind of made some mistakes in the beginning, I'd say.
Yeah, but it's interesting how, I think the community's reaction to him was appropriate. No one threatened him over it, no one lost their mind over it, but he just kind of didn't get much support.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I could if I could say one thing, I'd say that when somebody gets locked up, especially in a big case like that, I think it's critical that people from the outside, there should even be a quick response team of some kind of source that gets in touch with the individual co-defendants, because the problem is the feds will come in and they tell you, everybody told on you, you're going to be in jail for 1,000,000 years, and it's just very hectic time. You don't know what's going on, and the charges, so they indict you on, so let's say charges A, B, and C, right? So what happens is they'll come to you and say, hey, you better cooperate or we're going to give you charge D. And you're like, what? What is charge D? And charge D might be kind of really just barely there, but, the federal juries, they'll convict you on whatever. So if you say, no, I'm going to trial still, then they give you a superseding indictment and add charge D. And then they can add charge E and F and G. You know what I'm trying to get at? So it's like a never-ending thing where just more and more charges get added. So I just think that if there was a better network to get in touch with people and the different people involved and say, listen, just calm down, everything, and it's just weird when you're in a little cell and you don't know what the heck is going on. And I just think it would help if there was some kind of mechanism for that.
Well, I guess that mechanism, I saw it in action when I got locked up for, I guess it was basically for filming once, and what did they do? I was a free stater lawyer basically appeared he was at the jail, or he was in contact at the jail within 12 hours of me being arrested. And the jail had informed me of his presence and his availability and stuff like that before, and it was just because people knew it had happened, right? And so I guess the thing that would work would be getting a lawyer to someone at the earliest possible second.
Not necessarily. The problem, so you have some good lawyers. I had two actually. My initial attorney, and then he said, listen, I have a friend, he's good with paperwork, I want to bring him on, and since the government was footing the bill, I said, hey, do whatever you got to do. And he was good. He was a good attorney, and he did help, but you'll have a lot of attorneys that are just, especially the public defender's office, which is a whole disaster in itself, but they're just so swamped and/or don't care that doesn't really help your situation out most times. Because, as you know, I mean, I don't know if you went to trial, but I'm assuming you would be familiar with the concept that their job is to get you to plead guilty. And they just want to be done because they get paid and everything moves along. Going to trial is not really part of their game. So you'll have a lot of them that just right off the rip to be like, so you ready to plead guilty? All right, it throws you off because you're saying, wait, I didn't do this and this, or this is bogus, and I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but their angle is a little bit different from what you might be trying to accomplish. So they're not really too intent on proving your innocence so much as just getting the check and keeping it moving.
Yeah, it was actually what you're saying makes perfect sense. And when I say lawyer, I mean an activist lawyer. I mean a Free Stater lawyer or a libertarian lawyer. Okay. I mean a Seth Hipple or someone like that. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And so, you know, obviously our movement is big enough to have those.
Yeah, I heard it was one, or maybe a few that were involved with the Concord rallies for the reopen New Hampshire stuff, and there was a few that said, hey, if anybody gets locked up, I'll be here to help you out, and that definitely changes the dynamic as well. Just knowing that if you do get jammed up, you'll at least have somebody working for you.
Yes, I mean, that's what the people used to say about Dr. King, is that he was able to turn the courts into an ally, or at least his people were, and that's when the civil rights movement got turned into something really effective.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I like the idea of what happened, what was it, in 2012. New Hampshire, the governor signed into law the jury nullification, I forget what they call it, law where the defense attorneys can now tell the jurors about jury nullification and how they don't have to vote guilty just because the person committed the crime, but they can actually look at the law itself and vote and see if it's a bad law, and they can nullify it and set the person free. And I think that my point being is that I have more faith in the state courts than I do at the federal courts. It's hard. It's just there's no limit to how much they can spend, and I just don't. Once you're inside a prison, you see all the people with different situations and just how they, you start reading different people's cases, and I mean, there's people still doing time for marijuana, decades and decades. This one guy had been locked up forever. I mean, why do we have people in federal prison on weed cases? You know what I mean? It's just like there's just so much of that going on that it's just hard to say, the federal courts are our ally. I understand it's still the law and they have to enforce the law, but at a certain point, I mean, it's just, you got to kind of read the writing on the wall.
Well, I mean, if Dr. King was able to do it, then that means it can be done. But you're right, it's the feds are like a mountain. They're very difficult to move, but everything is, we're in Soviet 1987 mode right now, and that means we could be in Russia 1991 mode in 4 years, so...
That's a good way of putting it. I suppose you're right on that one. Things definitely feel like they're about to shift.
Yeah. Well, Jason, you're a fascinating interview, and we could talk for a lot longer. We should do this again sometime.
No, it's been fun, Dave.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate it.
I want to cut it off before either of us lose our voices.
All right, sounds good, man. Have a good night.
But it's great to finally be able to talk to you. I'm sorry I didn't do more to keep you fed with mail. But
it's fine.
I thank you for sticking with the New Hampshire Liberty Movement.
No, thank you for having me. Everybody's been really kind and welcoming, and I really look forward to working with everyone into the future.
All right. Take care. Welcome to Skype.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.
Driving in circles around Central Keene, I hurl both insults, angry and mean, against the activists from Free Keene, who wander around thinking as though they were free, and even though they aren't hurting me, I will hate them hatefully, urging their appearance in the penitentiary, although that expense would be charged to me. I'm starting to feel somewhat confusedly.